Greetings to baristas. Well, excuse me. Those of you in the US and A, pause a moment and look at your money. Like this here. Yeah, I'm sure you can see the famous cliche, "In God we trust," meaning, I suppose, that even the streets in heaven are paved thanks to the American gold standard. Those of us without gold reserves are supposed to be locked out of said divine municipality, I suppose. Well, that's fine, because there was nothing otherworldly in how they got their wealth anyway. The golden bull worshipped on Wall Street is proof of that. We're hearing a lot of the usual class war hype from the right this election year that the wealthy are job creators. Let's table the fact that they're creating jobs for badly underpaid Mexicans and Filipinos and see how they got their wealth. Wealth in a class society is created by ownership. Historically, it was appropriated by tribal elites who claimed communal lands for themselves and usurped their fellow tribesmen through command of arms, as in European feudalism. This was a long-done deed by the time North America was thrown open for private investment in the form of colonial settlement. Most American corporate wealth was created by these original British settlers. The ones who got to North America first, got the land, traded and speculated in it, ran the shipping companies and the Atlantic trade, bought and sold the slaves. They invited immigrants to come and build up the country so they could sell them more land, develop factories to sell and ship more stuff, and exponentially grow richer as population grew denser. The big American city was the creation of wealth, but also the creator of wealth, accumulating over generations. The property system established by the founders ensured that this wealth would continue to flow upward against all laws of gravity. It was the British Empire's desire to cut itself in on that growing wealth which led to the American Revolution. And ever since then, the property classes have sought to maintain the kind of government that does not restrict but enhances their inherited wealth. Because most of the wealth is still inherited. Sure, there's the Bill Gateses and Steve Jobs, but they grew wealthy by plugging into an established financial system that funded their technology as useful to perpetuate wealth already in existence, already concentrated, already distributed upward, and already inherited. Protecting inherited wealth is the sole purpose of government as these wealth holders conceive it. Whenever you hear these people talk about human rights, freedom, democracy, and the rule of law, be sure of one thing. They mean their human right to own, their freedom to inherit, their franchisement to control the state like any other hired servant, which means their right to create law to keep you ruled for their benefit. Just think of the American Legislative Exchange Council, and you've got the picture. When you, the 99% or so, intrude on their property rights, you are threatening freedom and democracy and human rights by definition. That is the purpose of the proposed SOPA law, as one example, stopping online piracy, which has meant your intrusion, that is, your freedom, on their right to own. Freedom for the many is always a threat to rulers and monopolists. That's why true grassroots action like the Occupy movements and true free access to knowledge through file sharing are beaten and gassed and maced and sanctioned and sued, while the Tea Party and Disney Studios dance atop their AstroTurf unmolested. But why does this mean the system has failed? Well, it depends on who you are, doesn't it? That's the essence of class. It succeeded very well for those at the top, even when they failed. They have a safety net because they're too big to fall. Their crash would bring us down, so the story goes. Only we're already down. The system has failed for the rest of us, exactly as it's designed to do. Let the fuckers fall. They can't do any more collateral damage than they already have. The system is not only broken, it needs further breaking. To break the 1% wealth system, for instance, the inheritance chain must be broken. Now, I'm not speaking about someone inheriting the family farm or restaurant or corner store. Again, I mean the kind of inherited wealth that lives off interest. The only way to upend the 99% is to tax capital gains and inheritance at 50% at the minimized, let's say. And above that, above $1 million in value per person, perhaps nationalize it. In order to keep as much of the wealth as possible, the wealthy would have to distribute it themselves as much as possible in their own interest. The penalty would be complete nationalization, which is where, in my opinion, as I said, it should go. This means that the state must at the very least create a ceiling that bounces wealth creation back to the floor, creating that hypothetical open field instead of letting it pile like shit and periodically collapsing under its weight as it's doing now. If that wealth in the U.S. were distributed two ways, that is, as horizontally as vertically, Think what economic benefit that would bring to the real economy, that is, to real working people. Gee whiz, they might actually own their own homes, instead of being foreclosed through bogus mortgages that brought down the national house. A pig's ass. A likely prop that. Yeah, we might actually have a free creative media that doesn't need to protect its market monopoly scam by SOPA laws. But we can't have anything like that. No, that would endanger freedom, democracy, and human rights, meaning property rights. That would be tyranny, meaning depriving the wealthy of their ill-gotten capital gains and inheritance. But when they deprive you of your job, which they supposedly created just for you, when they run you out of your home, repossess your car, bankrupt you through loans out the ass, that is freedom, democracy, and human rights in action. When they sue you for infringing on their property rights, territorial, intellectual, biological, what have you, gained by their expropriation of the public domain, that is defending the rule of law and creative self-expression. Well, you can't have it two ways. Democracy for the rich equals tyranny for you. The only way to have democracy and empowerment and self-expression for the 99% is to roll back the tyranny of the 1%. I defy you to break that equation. This was the original definition of Marx's proletarian dictatorship, not throwing the rich up against the wall, though the idea has its charms, but creating the kind of political and economic hegemony that keeps wealth for the social benefit of those who actually make it possible. Not the job creators, but you out there doing the work. The 99%, not the so-called visionary, whose only claim to it is his daddy or a bank startup money and the brains and labor of others, millions of consumers, who expropriates their ill-gotten gains and returns it to society. That 99%, that is, from which it was expropriated in the first place. But that'll destroy economic freedom and creativity, the basis of prosperity. Well, for us 99%ers, economic freedom already does not exist, beyond the most basic individual level of marketing the product of our hand and brain labor. Most individual enterprise fails within 2 years without heavy outside capitalization in the form of subsidy, loans, investments, or absorbed by corporate power outright. This is the end game of our creative capacity in the free market of corporate rule. Again, it's freedom for a few. Big capital has the game, the market, sewn up. Peasant farmers don't independently compete with the hacienda next door for very long. They're either bought out, contracted, or simply foreclosed out of production. Usually with the case of the rural gendarmes pushing said peasant family out of house and home. Without equitable distribution of social assets for the greater good, equal opportunity becomes a lie, at least a game, a con job. This reminds me of Andrew Carnegie's Gospel of Wealth, written in 1889. This, of course, is the real American gospel at work, even among the American Christian right of the Republican Party. A reading shows that nothing has changed in this sacred text in the 21st century, and why should it? After all, the gospel is eternal, for all persons, times, and places, regardless of circumstances or context. No secular humanism or common humanity at all, no human decency is allowed when entering the holy temples of Wall Street, where the sacrificial lambs scream and drown in their own blood before the golden bull. Anyway, Mr. Carnegie wrote, "The problem of our age is the proper administration of wealth, that the ties of brotherhood may still bind together the rich and poor in harmonious relationship. The contrast between the palace of the millionaire and the cottage of the laborer with us today measures the change which has come with civilization. This change, however, is not to be deplored, but welcomed as highly beneficial. A relapse to old conditions, that is, of greater equity between employee and CEO, would be disastrous to both, not the least so to him who serves, and would sweep away civilization with it. But whether the change be for good or ill, it is upon us, beyond our power to alter, and therefore to be accepted and made the best of. It is a waste of time to criticize the inevitable. Note that it's in human power to create, but once created cannot be changed or undone, but merely resigned to. Totally illogical from a divine or human point of view, and in that lies its fallacy and falsehood." But he continues, "The price which society pays for the law of competition is also great. But it is here. We cannot evade it. No substitutes for it have been found. And while the law may be sometimes hard for the individual, it is best for the race." By this he means the human race in its old-fashioned sense, because it ensures the survival of the fittest in every department. We accept and welcome, therefore, as conditions to which we must accommodate ourselves, great inequality of environment, the concentration of business, industrial and commercial, in the hands of a few, because it is inevitable that their income, that is, the wealth creators, must exceed their expenditures, and that they must therefore accumulate wealth. Nor is there any middle ground which such men can occupy. Only they are allowed to occupy, in other words. It will be understood that fortunes are here spoken of, not moderate sums saved by many years of effort. Your family neighborhood grocery store, your neighborhood gas station, your little family restaurant. No. He's not talking about that, as I've said before. That's not what he means. That's not what they mean on Wall Street. Not the moderate sums saved by many years of effort, the returns from which are required for the comfortable maintenance and education of families. This is not wealth, but only competence, which it should be the aim of all to acquire, and which it is for the best interest of society should be required. No. What else is relevant here? There remains then only one mode of using great fortunes. The true antidote for the temporary unequal distribution of wealth, the reconciliation of the rich and the poor, a reign of harmony, another ideal, differing indeed from that of the communist, in requiring only the further evolution of existing conditions, not the total overthrow of our civilization. Under its sway we shall have an ideal state, in which the surplus wealth of the few will become, in the best sense, the property of the many, because administered for the common good. And this wealth, passing through the hands of the few, can be made a much more potent force for the elevation of our race than if distributed in small sums to the people themselves. Even the poorest can be made to see this, and to agree that great sums, gathered by some of their fellow citizens and spent for public purposes, from which the masses reap the principal benefit, are more valuable to them than if scattered among themselves in trifling amounts through the course of many years. If we consider the results distributed for work done in the form of wages, distributed in small quantities among the people, it would have been wasted in the indulgence of appetite, some of it in excess, and it may be doubted whether even the part put to the best use, that of adding to the comforts of the home, would have yielded results for the race, as a race. Let the advocate of violent or radical change ponder well this thought. Okay, well, let me continue a little bit more here. He is the only true reformer who is as careful and as anxious not to aid the unworthy as he is to aid the worthy, and perhaps even more so, for in almsgiving more injury is probably done by rewarding vice than by relieving virtue. In the manner that he has outlined, returning the surplus wealth to the masses of their fellows in the forms best calculated to do them lasting good. Thus is the problem of rich and poor to be solved. The laws of accumulation will be left free, the laws of distribution free. Individualism will continue, but the millionaire will be but a trustee of the poor, entrusted for a season with a great part of the increased wealth of the community, but administering it for the community far better than it could or would have done for itself. Probably even not only as individuals, but as political entities of self-government. Such, in my opinion, is the true gospel concerning wealth, obedience to which is destined someday to solve the problem of the rich and the poor, and to bring peace on earth among men goodwill, a perpetual and eternal Christmas. Well, as I pause to take a drink out of the pig's ass, we say this is the role model of the libertarian capitalist state, with society and its members dependent on the noblesse oblige of the master class. There's no room for collective action at the bottom of society. There's certainly no room for government at the top, even self-governing democratic forms of rule. And as the date of Mr. Carnegie's essay shows, we've been here before. Andrew Carnegie was supposedly the very embodiment of the rags to riches immigrant success story, but a close look at his biography shows a career of favoritism from on high and plugging into corporate wealth already established. Aside from that, how did his gospel of wealth work out in practice? Did it bring harmonious relations between the man of work and the man of wealth? Did it bring a cornucopia of plenty, a permanent Christmas, a heaven on earth? with streets paved by the gold standard. Well, 3 years after this gospel was published, the workers of Carnegie Steel Mill in Homestead, Pennsylvania, staged a walkout over a 22% wage decrease. This was a deliberate union-busting provocation, as their walkout resulted in a lockout of organized workers of the Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers and filling their places by scabs, replacement workers. Apparently, these semi-literate steelworkers hadn't the leisure to read Mr. Carnegie's gospel. Why else would they have challenged his benevolence in an Occupy Homestead movement? Why else would they have revolted in being reduced to instant depression? But did Mr. Carnegie attempt to reason with them? No. The only gospel tracts he saw fit to pass out were rifle bullets. Like Tsar Nicholas of Russia a decade later, he weaseled out of town and then sent Cossacks to break the strike. And when the Pinkerton Private Police Squad was taken prisoner, then came the Pennsylvania State Militia to give the strikers a rifle diet, in the phrase of the times. The ringleaders were arrested and sentenced as revolutionary political offenders. So much for "In God We Trust," but typical for upholding the American gospel of law and human rights by its gold standards, as well as the harmonious cooperation between the well-meaning distributor of private wealth and the recipient employee. No, I know that's not Santa Claus, because Christmas is over. Maybe I'm wrong. Hello, Andrew Carnegie. You want to take issue with this video? Because you made up for this tragedy at Homestead by putting the gospel of wealth to work, by endowing hundreds of Carnegie public libraries across the country. That's why you were no undemocratic czar. If he'd followed your example, he'd have suffered no revolution, and the world would have been so much better. No global class war, no social hatreds, no revolutions, no Cold War over the next century. But why didn't your gospel work miracles 3 years before? Why was there no cornucopia of Christmas? Yes, your libraries have been a valuable public treasure. Only, I knew old-timers who refused to ever enter one of them. Every time they'd pass one, they'd be sure to point at it and say, "Blood money built that." What reply do you have for them? Hello? Mr. Carnegie? This YouTube line always seems to go dead at the right moment. Must be that new SOPA law.